idea to
Good afternoon. This webinar offers closed captioning. To enable closed captioning, click on the live transcript button on the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred method. Welcome to the Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection webinar. Please note, any website or email that I mentioned will be posted in the chat. For those seeking business license assistance, you can visit Small Business Center here at City Hall or call 312-74-GO-BIZ. Also, business license can be applied for or renewed online at chicagobusinessdirect.org. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about this program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. This webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. We encourage all attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box to send your questions, as there will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Please note that the views, information, and opinions expressed during this webinar are solely those of the presenter and does not necessarily represent the official policy or position of the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection or the City of Chicago. At this time, I will now turn this webinar over to Shelby for us to begin.
This is the only text.
I think you're muted.
All right, I'm ready to go. My bad. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And it's always a pleasure to be able to present for the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection in their webinar series. I'm Shelby Parchman, and today we are going to talk about how do you sustain your business in these tough and inflationary times. Just to give you a quick overview of who I am, for those who may not know, I know we do have some regulars. I am the managing partner of InUrban Strategies, which is a consulting firm who's worked at various projects in the city and have a lot of exciting things going on right now. But our 4 key areas of operation: we work in strategic planning for nonprofit and for-profit organizations. For nonprofits, we do a lot of program development and program delivery, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship training programs. We work with various agencies to help provide technical assistance for access to capital. And one of our newest areas that we're starting to focus on is to develop a back office support system of services for small businesses, especially as it relates to finance and accounting, because we've seen that is one of the most crucial areas for a small business, but also one where there is a lot of room for improvement. And having those services, we definitely have seen it helped our small business clients. All right, so I talked about some of the work that we do, and I'll just give you a quick overview of some of our key clients and some of the projects that we worked on and continue to work on. One of our biggest projects is supply chain localization with Rush University Medical Center, where we connect them with entrepreneurs on the west side of Chicago for procurement opportunities. And so we've been doing that with Rush for almost a little over 3 years now, and have been very successful in gaining new procurement opportunities for small businesses. And through that, we also coach the businesses to make sure they have what it takes to be successful in the Rush University Medical Center environment. We've worked with the City of Chicago Department of Planning and Development to help develop out Cultivate Chicago, which is an urban agriculture program, but really around the business of urban agriculture. And that project was a lot of fun. And we do some work in terms of some smaller parts of the work that we continued on as an organization because we enjoyed the work so much. Then just kind of going in a counterclockwise fashion here in Family Farm, which is now a good food catalyst, but we went in and did more strategic and operations planning, but also helping develop out new entrepreneurship programs for small food-based businesses. And we continue to do that now with a focus on the south and west sides of Chicago, but also to help them develop a program called Good Food is Good Medicine, where we work on helping change dietary habits with and people on the south and west sides of Chicago, just from a health focused perspective. And then the last one, our InUrban Ventures is a partner in Green Metals Foods, and we had mentioned in the description that we will do a quick case study on how one of our portfolio companies have weathered the storm. Not perfectly, but we certainly have done quite well during these inflationary times. And I like to share some of the things that we've done from our perspective, and hopefully some of those things can help your business. So let's go ahead and get into this webinar. So I always start my presentations with a burning question. And I feel that if you didn't have a burning question, there's really no point in showing up today. And I feel that the burning question, at least I had with all the companies that we have invested in, is how can our businesses survive when costs are going up and labor and materials are hard to find? And I know that almost every small business that we've worked with, or any business that we've operated, these have been our burning questions. And a lot of this has kept me up late at night. And I'm sure that it's keeping some of you guys up late at night as well. And so when I was asked, so like, what's a good topic? And I thought this would be a good topic to share with business owners in the city of Chicago, because I know this is extremely important. And it is a topic that keeps us up late at night. And before I get into my long presentation, my short answer, if you survive COVID, you can probably survive anything. And I know I did a webinar on how to survive COVID, and I hope a lot of those businesses that took that webinar learned something from it. And they're here today to learn a little more about how now this next challenge is how they can overcome these next set of challenges. But one of the things that I will say is that when you're in business, you're always going to have challenges, and the challenges are going to be very similar in terms of the effects. It's just usually the cause is somewhat different. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too, because business planning is of utmost importance. I know a lot of times we get into the weeds and we forget that we have to take a step back and look at our plan and modify our plan and really adjust for what's going on. And those who are able to, and I tell people, I hate the word pivot, but I'm going to use it once in this presentation, and this is the one time I'm going to use it. But those who are able to pivot are the ones who are surviving. But I look at it and I say, based on the work that we've done, it's more about planning. And when you plan, you don't have to pivot. You just start working on plan B, C, or D, which is already somewhat in place, if not all the way in place, because you can't plan for everything. So what are our learning objectives today? What I want to give you for showing up today is, first of all, we want to define inflation and how it affects small business. I wanted to give you some approaches to fighting inflation through a revenue perspective, one through a cost of goods perspective, and then another through an expense perspective. But also one of the other things that is kind of unprecedented is that on top of all of this inflation that we have on, we also have increased customer demand. And that brings on a whole new set of challenges, because things are expensive and things are hard to find. Then lastly, as I promised, we're going to do a quick case study on our Green Metals Foods, and we are a beef jerky manufacturing organization. All right, so let's define inflation. In very simple terms, I know sometimes it's like, this is very remedial, but it's always nice to revisit stuff and make sure that everybody in the room understands what we're talking about. And inflation is defined as the increase of the prices of goods and services over time. And what happens, a wide range of products and services are getting more expensive, and we certainly see that. And then what happens? Customers buy less stuff. And I put a question mark there because right now, we have inflationary times and customer demand is increasing, which actually it goes against the grain, and it throws another variable into it. And like, how do we manage and navigate all of that? We can see a reduction in profitability. And also we can see that business growth can be delayed as a result of inflation. And now one thing we're so accustomed to low inflation that we don't even realize that inflation is around. But typically, inflation has been pretty low, in the like 2% range. But what we now see is that inflation went from like, a 2% to a much larger number. And that is where, and it went there fast. And that's where businesses will have a tough time adjusting to that. And it certainly can have a negative effect on one's business. All right. So the question is, first is I like to ask, if we're in a situation, how did we get here? Well, let's first flash back to 2019 at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. I say we all work from home, but I would say 90% of us, with the exception of essential services, work from home. And when everybody worked from home, there was a decreased demand on a lot of stuff. And we saw that, right? And one of the most important ones that I'm sure everybody can relate to today is that we didn't need gas. And just the simple laws of supply and demand, when there's no demand for something, the prices go down. And I know I probably have a few folks crying looking at these fuel prices at $1.85 a gallon. But yeah, that's where we were. And it was a great time. I mean, I was always joking that gas prices are so low and I have nowhere to go. And now we know now that we have places to go, gas prices are extremely high. But what happened? Everything stopped. No one was going out buying things. Factories and businesses were closed, and production came to a halt. And that really, when you start thinking about it, as we start moving forward and talking about increased customer demand, that's one of the things that really happened. And it's this notion of pent up demand. And when people can't buy, at some point, when the floodgates are going to open. So we had a perfect storm that came right after, as the pandemic started ending or subsiding, shall I say. The economy began to recover. And we see that, right? People are getting out, doing things. Vaccination, so people felt more comfortable being in crowds, and stimulus checks came in. And so now we can get out and we have extra money. And what do? I mean, the stimulus checks were meant to do that, right? To stimulate. And they did a great job. People came out in droves, and now I go out to the mall. I'm close to the Oakbrook Mall, and it's like during the week it's crowded because people are getting back to their shopping habits. And I say normal, but I would say abnormally high shopping habits. And when that happens, demand increases. So the demand for products started skyrocketing. We see that, and we had chip shortages, and all of a sudden cars were not available. New cars weren't available, and the price of new cars just went out the roof and it was just absolutely crazy. Factories can't generate as many raw materials to make, like the chip maker was the NVIDIA, who makes a lot of chips for the cars. They had a chip shortage, and now you can't produce the cars. You can produce them, but you can't put the chips in them, so you can't sell them. And so we saw a lot of that, and products aren't available. I know at one point, right, lumber, it was extremely expensive, so the cost of building went up, and housing prices went up. So there's just so many things that happen. And buyers are fighting for very few products, and they're still doing that, right? But we're starting to see somewhat of a slowdown. I love looking at prices, and I'm noticing that a lot of prices are starting to step down just a little bit, but we do see that the pressure is starting to come off, and that's the good news. But I talked about the loss supply and demand, and in most instances for the long haul, it always rules, right? When raw material prices are going to rise, then your product prices have to rise, and if they don't, that's going to be tough for the business owner to make a profit, right? And so that brings us to where we are today. And so we fast forward to this year. We all escaped the house, right? We're out. We're going to our concerts. Matter of fact, I went to probably too many concerts this weekend. We going out to our concerts. We're shopping. We're doing everything. But what happened? We needed gas. Now, it's just not that people getting out. We know there's some other stuff that happened in terms of the Russian invasion of the Ukraine that put a strain on gas. But that's kind of the double whammy, right? Because things are starting to open up. Gasoline prices are starting to creep up because more people are buying gas. Summertime is is, the high usage season because everybody's hitting the road. And so now we're definitely, and this was taken in California, Menlo Park, California, where gasoline is $7.25 a gallon. I shudder to think. I try to stay out the city buying gas, but I can imagine that it's pretty expensive there. But it's expensive across the board, and so we see this. Everybody wants to travel. Flights are more expensive. Household furnishings. If you order something, you may have to wait 6 to 8 months and pay a higher price. New cars, as I mentioned, rental cars are extremely expensive, and even clothing. So, and in many instances, is like you can't really find them. And I know they talked about it in the news this weekend. Is when this is the peak travel season, especially if you're traveling on holiday weekends, you're likely to get flights canceled. So these are some very tough times we're in right now. So that brings us to our problem that we'll restate, is that businesses are finding it incredibly difficult to navigate how to absorb these increased prices, and also how to, anticipating how long these price increases may last. Sometimes if that like it's a short-term bump, like gasoline, sometimes it spikes in the summer and you're like, okay, we'll just weather this storm. But right now it's hard to see an end in sight for anything, and things are creeping up even more and more, especially in terms of gasoline prices. I hear the national average now is right a little below $5 a gallon, and I didn't know that we would rejoice at gasoline being a little under $5 a gallon, but that's cause for at least a one hand clap because it's now going in the right direction. So I'm going to throw out some facts about just what the effects of inflation are. So we know that COVID hit and businesses lost revenue, and now we're dealing with high costs as inflation increases. Then we look at the consumer price index, which measures the price of goods and services. It has increased by 8.5% in March from March of 2021. So that is a very significant increase. That's a lot more than that 2% I talked about earlier. And then the producer price index, which the prices paid for by wholesalers. So people are raising prices, right? In reaction to this. So they jumped 11.2% over that March 2021 to March 22 period. And so that means that if you're a business owner, your cost of goods are going up. And then I just want to throw in a couple of surveys here. In this one survey, 60% of respondents, they're concerned about the financial health of their business because of inflation. And I would say most of our small businesses are probably those 60% respondents. Larger businesses have different ways of being able to respond and to react to that. I know my wife works for Navistar, and when the pandemic hit, they thought they were running low of money. They went and borrowed $500 million. Small businesses can't just run out and borrow money. Usually when times get tough, the borrowing gets much more difficult for small businesses than those larger publicly traded corporations. There is a tough time in terms of meeting customer demand. And I can raise my hand on that one because our beef jerky manufacturing, we have more customers than we have production capacity. And usually that's a good thing, but we can't order equipment to meet that increased customer demand, and we can't find employees and staff members to help us meet that. So we're seeing opportunities lost. Profit margins are decreasing, and also businesses are reducing the size of their inventory. That means that they're spending less money. And then just a quick bank rate survey, and more than half of the people say inflation is going to be more significant than experience in the next 12 to 18 months. So, we really have to think about how do we get prepared for that. And then we have, of course, why is that happening is we have these supply bottlenecks and labor shortages. And I tell you, I have so many positions in different companies that are open now that we just can't find labor for. And it really is unnerving because we have the business, we just don't have enough people to make stuff. And I also mentioned that the invasion of Ukraine that has really put the second whammy on all this inflationary stuff and added a second a larger inflationary pressure than any of us could have ever imagined. So it's like we're going into an inflationary period. Then all of a sudden we get this bad news, and you see gas spiking even more, and it's just become a tough time. And the impact is increasing. So 41% of the small businesses say they have experienced pressure in the last 1 to 3 months, and this compared to 25% that said that in the last 10 to 12 months. So it just seems like it's getting worse. And so and certainly we know that it's hitting our cost of supplies. And I know a lot of business owners I talk to are really experiencing that. So now we'll get into more of how, now that we have a good background in terms of what happened, how did we get here, what's the issues, what's the impact. Let's start working on our own businesses and understanding how we can resolve those issues and work through some of those things. And so I started with, and I talked about it earlier in terms of the areas that we're going to hit. And so I thought it'd be just really, I went through just a real simple equation, right? Because this is the simple equation that really drives all of our businesses, right? We're looking for revenue. In most instances, especially if we have a product business, we have a cost of goods sold. And then we have expenses, general operating expenses, and that we subtract from the revenue as well as the cost of goods. And we are shooting for this net profit. And that's the money that we're able to take home. And as business owners, we're trying to build wealth. And so we want to make that first circle revenue as big as we can. And we want to make the next two circles as small as we can, because that makes our net profit circle grow along with all of that. All right, so we'll talk about the revenue side of things first. And, the simplest thing to do is just raise prices, right, in response to inflation. And a lot of people, companies have done that. But one of the things that I've seen is that there is a lot of pressure from customers and clients. They understand that inflation is high. I think that costs are going up, but they are very, very resistant to increases in prices right now. And so, and we have that, and we've experienced that. And so some of the things that I can suggest to business owners is that first, you have to get the customer to understand that. I know anytime somebody says that the price has gone up and it's significant, you're going to get a lot of customer resistance unless you are selling a product that somebody really, really needs and they really have to have it, right? But you see some people, I know a lot of my friends have been putting off car purchases, and in some instances they really need it, but they're like, the prices are too high. So I'll start with having a great relationship with your customer. And what we try to do in our businesses is look at our customer as our partner and not just as a customer who's purchasing a product from us. So we try to keep close relationships with them, and we have those honest conversations with them. And in one instance, the customer said, well, I will give you we'll accept the price increase because we are actually locked into a lower price. And they said that we will give you a price increase if you can show us where the prices are increasing. So we did a very exhaustive look at our labor, our raw materials and things. And we showed them, it's like, hey, based on increased labor costs, it actually costs us 13 cents more a pound to produce this product. And what we charge, 13 cents a pound, is roughly 5 or 6%, which is to us is very significant because that's 6% of profitability that we're losing. And so what I suggest that we look at is, you have these types of relationships with your customers, agree to some type of compromise, right? And that could be, let's do a short-term price increase and let's do a review down the road, because hey, inflation is probably at its all-time high. It may creep up a little more, but let's, if it goes back down, this relationship that we have with the customer is like, your pricing will go down. We won't stick to that. So one of the things that I always suggest is you're running a business is to look at customers as partners. And when you have worked together in good times, it's easier to work together in bad times. And so that to me is a very good approach to customer relationship. And it has been working very effective for a lot of the businesses that I have been a part of. But the other side of it too is you can look at new markets. And I know I promised a case study, but I just do want to use one example. It says explore new sales channels. So what we've looked at in the beef jerky manufacturing side of things is that we have other channels. The meat products are what we call USDA products. They're regulated by the USDA. But there's also beef jerky products for animals, and there are also vegan jerky products. And those products tend to have higher margins. So we actually started, and they're regulated by the FDA, so they're cheaper to make. So we actually started ramping up more of our FDA production as opposed to our USDA production, and that allows us to keep a level of profitability and also keep all our customers happy. So sometimes you have to start getting a little creative in this, and that's why I said when earlier when we started talking about reviewing the business plan, then it's really important to make sure that as you review your business plan, that you think about that market side of things and the target market side of things, because that there could be a market out there that's willing to pay a slightly higher price for your product, or the margins are better. All right, so then we'll jump into our cost of goods sold. And this is something I tell every small business that they should do on a very regular basis, is to make sure that they are reviewing their cost of goods sold. And this is whether or not in good times and bad times. If you do it in good times, the bad times won't be so bad. Because what I've noticed with a lot of small business owners is that they really don't have a good handle on their cost of goods sold. And that means that they're already making very little gross margin. And then when times get really bad, they realize how bad it really is. So let's start with some of the things that I can suggest. Number one is you can lower ingredient costs. That be when you say prices are going up, how can we lower ingredient costs? There's a couple of ways you can do that, and there's a couple of things that I've seen. Number one, I wouldn't suggest this, and some of these things where you see a lot of larger companies doing it because they are already an established brand. I'll take, for instance, Oreo cookies, which I used to. No, I'm going to take that back, and I'm going to say Salerno butter cookies. That's kind of old school here in Chicago, and those are my favorite cookies, and I used to love to dip them in milk. And they were really, really good. And then one day I woke up and they started using high fructose corn syrup instead of sugar. Much cheaper, but it certainly changed the quality of the product. So one of the things that you don't want to do is use lower cost ingredients, and it makes a significant change in your product, especially if you're a small business, because your customer base will run quickly away from you. But one of the other things that you can do is you can look at like one of our clients did in the beef jerky world. We do a marination, and you soak it into the soy based product liquid, and soy sauce base, and you let it marinate for a while. And so one of the things they looked at is like, I know there's some extra marination left over in the tank that we have to throw out. Do we need as much liquid in the tank? And putting 10% or 20% less liquid in the tank lowers your ingredient cost. But you have to do studies, of course, but it didn't, according to their studies, it didn't change the taste and the texture of the product. So they were able to do that. We can look at lower cost packaging. And that's one that takes that's one that you should look at over time, because packaging, it's not always easy to change packaging. But once again, those are some of the things that even in non-inflationary times, you should look at, and how do I lower in packaging costs? Decrease weight and volume. I put a picture of the Stella beer over there. It's one of the beers I like to stock when I have a party. And one day I picked up a bottle, and I was like, boy, this bottle seems to be a little smaller than I'm accustomed to. And I looked at the bottle, and it used to be a 12-ounce bottle. Now it's 11.2 ounces. But it's the same 6-pack, same looking bottle. And so those are some of the tricks that some of the larger manufacturers use. But definitely, if you're a small business owner, you can think about that because and I one of the places is at least one of the businesses I know is very notorious for giving out too much stuff is that those are caterers. A lot of caterers that we've run into, and that you ask for food for 20 people and they deliver food for about 50. And I can say that you could probably get away with cutting that in like by 30%, and no one would complain and no one would notice. And so, as just for example, if you're a caterer, the most there's a couple of important things that you want to know. That number one, that you deliver food on time. It's hot if it's supposed to be hot, or cold if it's supposed to be cold. It should be tasty, and those are the things that most people look at. And it's like, and the customer satisfied, right? And it's like, hey, job well done. But I would suggest to a caterer is to stop and look at what's left over when you're done. And when there's too much food left over, that means that you lost money, and that you bought too much food, you spent too much time cooking food, and there was a lot of food left over. So those are, like I said, those are some of the simple things that you can take a look at that you may not even think about, and you can lower your cost of goods. And I talked a little bit about this in terms of ingredient costs, but can review whatever recipes you have. If you're a owner, maybe take some of the products or service that you're selling and make them more a la carte. And I've seen it happen as well. You have a base set of services. You may remove one or two of those services and charge a little extra for it on the side. So and it really is what works for your business. I'm throwing out a long list of ideas here that can make sense for some of your guys' businesses. But also, if you have any specific questions, feel free to ask at the end. I'll be more than happy to answer, and I'll also leave my contact information. The other area, because gas is going up, freight and shipping costs are going up. I'll talk about this later, but a lot of things that, there are some things that you can do to reduce your freight and shipping costs. And for, some of it could be consolidating shipping, right? And finding other more inexpensive ways to get product out to people. But I think in most instances, or even using bulk ordering, because that could also be a way to save money, because there's going to be a base price for shipping anyway. And sometimes the adding more to the shipment is more incremental than it is like double the price. So be wary of that too, because that's a good way to save money in terms of cost of goods. And then for some who are using co-manufacturers or co-packers to pack some of your products, look local. And one of the new businesses that we're exploring is to bring some local co-manufacturing, co-packing here to the Chicago area, because we know Chicago is a huge hub for shipping. It's right in the middle of the country. There's a lot of cities in just a 500-mile radius that you can ship to. But in many instances, like you take a 6-pack of beer or any type of liquid product, water is very heavy and very expensive to ship. So if you have more localized manufacturing, localized packaging, that can reduce your cost of goods, and also reduce, in many instances, people visit their co-packers. And if you can find someone a little local, it can save on other expenses like travel expenses as well. All right. Now, in terms of expenses, my caption at the bottom says expenses are more difficult to control because these costs are usually locked in. But I'm just gonna throw a few in just for example. But they are those fixed expenses. Usually things with like rent or lease. You're probably pretty much locked in. You can try to renegotiate your lease with the way pricing, and sometimes in commercial space it's a little easier. You could drive more, and then I think this is the big one: driving more fuel efficient vehicles. I know on social media I see people complaining about how much it costs to fill this Cadillac Escalade, probably about $175, and then they get about 12 miles to the gallon. So the next day, after running around, you're back at the gas station doing it over and over again. I know the creature conference of the Escalade is pretty cool, but I know there's some people who also swear by their 50-mile per gallon Priuses. So, and it's one of those things as a business owner, you also have to look at what makes sense to you as a business owner. And I think a lot of times when times are good, we don't really think about how, you don't realize that we're locking ourselves into some really some tough financial situations if things go bad. And so, many people lock themselves into a lease or, a purchase contract on a vehicle. And now those are the ones who shout to the rafters about how expensive gas is. And so, but those are some of the things as a business owner, you have to start anticipating some of these things. And as you're starting to develop, if you're developing a fleet, or if you have a car, think about fuel efficiency because gas prices, they do fluctuate a lot and they can have a very strong impact on your business. Driving less and doing more efficient routes if you're a delivery person I think is key also. And then reducing energy expenses. Some people, work from home to reduce office expenses and not have office expenses, but really think about how you managing your utility and water expenses as well. And like I said, those are little things, but as a business owner, I look at everything and see where we can get any incremental savings because all of that contributes to the bottom line or reduce office footprint. We've learned how to work from home now. And so we may not need as much office space. And that's one of the things that we've done as an organization InUrban. We've severely reduced our office footprint because there are not a lot of people in the office at one time. So we discovered that we don't need as much office space and people can work from home. But that was a significant savings in terms of monthly rent payments we had to make. All right, so then we also talked and I mentioned about customer demand. And so one of the areas that we have always, we've encountered last is that we have supply chain issues. And so one of the things that we have done, and like I said, I'll talk about it and I can suggest, is to order larger quantities of material. And it's like, that seems counterintuitive. But one of the things that you have to think about is if there's strain on the supply chain and then you need some product and they say, well, it's out of stock for 4 weeks. That means that you can't manufacture for 4 weeks. So one of the things, and this really increases the cost of business, right? Because now you have to start buying, you have to anticipate that things are not going to come in as quickly as they used to. And maybe at one point you're able to order, a tub of Kikkoman soy sauce and it shows up in 3 days. And now you send in an order for soy sauce and it takes 3 weeks to 4 weeks to come in. And if we run out, then we can't produce for the customer. And it hurts us more than, paying the extra and having more in stock. Seek secondary suppliers. You should always have secondary suppliers when possible for all your product, anything that you use in your business to deliver either your products or your services, because that's really important. If one runs out, the other may have it. I talked about manufacturing local, but it's also important to support local small businesses and buy local as much as you can. That way you reduce shipping costs. The shipping time is reduced, and there may be times where you can go pick it up. And sometimes maybe the local pricing is a little higher. But when you think about the effects that not having that product available for your business, that could be a much higher cost than just paying like an extra 5% or 10% more. And then we look at the labor shortage, and that is another one that is really hurting businesses right now. So one of the things that we look at doing now, especially on the manufacturing side, is that we want to start cross-training employees. And that, because if one section, we don't have enough labor there, we can always move people over into another section. And that allows us to keep production moving more fluidly and seamlessly. But once again, counterintuitive, right? But a lot of now employees are demanding higher pay and more benefits. And so those are some of the things as a small business owner you have to do. And so along with, then of course, this is going to cause inflation on your end in terms of your costs are going up. But you also, as you're manufacturing, if you're manufacturing products or you're delivering services, you want the make sure that you're able to deliver those services and deliver those products in a timely fashion. But you also want to make sure that you keep good employees. So and so in many instances, paying more money and giving benefits will actually attract a higher performing employee. So it's more of a, to me, it's not an expense, but it's a great investment that you can make in your business. And then the third suggestion I would have is do you really think about promoting from within? And so some of the projects we're working on now is that we're working with some larger companies in terms of how do we help them set up programs for in-house training and promoting from within, and especially in instances where they're a college degree isn't necessary, but how do we give people and help train people to a certain skill that helps them move up in the organization and contribute, because they already know that employee and they're willing to make an investment in that employee. So to me, the best way to overcome a labor shortage is to really invest in the employees that you have, and anyone you bring in, to make sure that you pay them an attractive enough salary to make them to get a higher performing employee. All right, so now we will jump to our case study of beef jerky manufacturing. So I broke it off into 4 quadrants, and I broke it off into the areas that we have talked about: revenue, cost of goods, expenses, and also customer demand. So in terms of revenue, one of the things that we did is we just really did an exhaustive review of our margins. And when we first purchased invested in the company, we started, we really knew what our margins were and we really understood them. So as we started reviewing those, and amidst the price increases, one of the things that we started also looking at our customers, right, and how much they were paying and how much it cost us to make a particular product. So one of the things that we did was we started prioritizing higher margin customers. Now, we have the ability to do that because the demand is there. But in any business, one of the things that you want to do is you want to know who your high margin customers are. And I would suggest that you do prioritize them, because that's going to be the lifeblood of your business. And, that actually worked out really well, because we started seeing our margins increase almost immediately as we started doing more work in terms of our high margin customers. But we also did some price increases. Once again, most of our existing customers are very resistant to price increases. Some accepted, some didn't. But what we did was, those who didn't accept the price increase, they got low priority on our production schedule. And then one customer actually decided that they wanted to buy time on our production schedule, so they gave us an advance. So, when you think about it, if you're a business, especially if you're selling to another business, that business is having the same issues that you're having. And so there may be ways of working together to make sure that all parties are satisfied. And that's why I say it's really important to have that really good partnership, type relationship with the business that you're selling to, or even any customer base. And so the other thing we did was we added more capacity. Now, we could add even more capacity, but because of supply chain issues, it would take us 2 years to add additional capacity. So one of the things so we were able to add some more capacity, but secondly, now that we're looking at, and I'll talk about that more in operations, but we're looking at how do we make things more efficient. So then we'll jump to the next area, and that is our cost of goods. And I mentioned before is that we decided to do more bulk purchasing and ordering more at a time. So one of the things that does is that gives us a lower price, but it also reduces our freight costs. And then I didn't put this here, but I did mention it as well, is that it also allows us to have raw material ready and available to be able to manufacture without necessarily worrying about when will product ship, because that has been like the biggest issue for a lot of organizations, getting the raw material to ship it. And then lower cost, lower ingredient costs. So what we did was we worked with our customers and said, hey, if you want a lower price or you don't want us to raise prices, let's sit down, work together, and figure out what are some of the best ways to lower our ingredient costs. And so there are some areas where we actually were able to lower it by going, reducing some sizes of some of the things that we're using, but it didn't affect the overall taste, texture, and quality of the product. And so, so that actually worked out for both us and our customers. So some of that savings we passed on to the customer. So it worked out really well. So then expenses. And first of all, because things got more expensive, and also because we needed to have, we need to order more materials to keep them in stock, and because we were paying our employees a lot more money with more benefits, we had to get another cash infusion from our investors, which I can just like, I know like every 2 weeks and I said another, I'd say it's almost like a continual cash infusion until we get our capacity situated. But every other week is payroll, and I usually get a email from our largest investor with what payroll is, and this large number with like 4 exclamation points. And my only response is, yes, it is, right? So, they're, because you can't do the work without the payroll. And sometimes when people are not in the throes of the business, it's like all they see is a number. And I just like say, yes, payroll is that high, and there's not much I can do about it right now. But as a business owner, as I mentioned before, you have to be in a financial position to be able to withstand some of this stuff. And that's why it's always important to really think about your business finances and access to money and making sure that you have it. Now, fortunately for us, we do have investors have access to the dollars. But one of the things that investors hate is after they wrote a big check to have to keep writing checks. But that's just the nature of business, especially when you're more in the startup mode. And then staffing, right sizing. So as I started looking at the organization, there are areas where I certainly felt that we had redundancy in terms of some of the things and some of the functions that we had. So I started working to eliminate some of those redundancies, which will reduce our payroll costs. And then also I made sure that a lot of departments started cross training, because that will help us weather some of those short-term employee issues and lack of employees. And so that actually has appeared to be working out really well. And hopefully our payroll costs will start going down. And then I did talk about a little bit about this when I talked about adding capacity. So one of the things that we're working on now is we're reviewing all our operations. And the reason that is important is we want to operate as efficiently as possible. And so in this operational review, we started realizing that our ovens weren't working as well as they could be working. The product flow wasn't as good as it could be. And there were a lot of areas where we saw the need for improvement. And so as we start implementing these improvement items, it really drives the cost of our production down. It allows us to do more with less. And we also can increase our throughput, which allows us now to be more profitable and earn more revenue. So, and it really doesn't depend on how big or small your business is. There's always room for improvement. So it's always good to take a step back, review your operations. And a lot of times it makes more sense to bring an outsider in and say, hey, just, let me walk you through this. Let me show you what's going on. And can you give me some ideas in terms of where I can make some improvements? And you'll be surprised that when a person comes in, just look from the outside looking in, they can see a whole lot more than you see, because they have more of a bird's eye view where as a business owner, you're right in the thick of things and a lot of things just pass you by. And I mean, I looked at some of the operational issues that we had, and it took me 10 minutes to figure it out. And, I'm talking to one of our production managers and they are looking like glassy eyes. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And it's not that he didn't know, but you get stuck in the thick of things. Sometimes it's hard to see outside of the day-to-day issues that you're running into. So it's always good to have somebody to come in and just take a look at what you're doing and give you some feedback. And it's really important too to be open to feedback. And I find that a lot of business owners, small business owners, aren't open to feedback because they, it's their baby and it's like, I built it like this. But there's always room for an outside opinion, whether you listen to it or not. But at least keep your mind open to some outside opinion. Then just in terms of customer demand, we get back to that bulk purchasing, and that's where we help eliminate some of the supply chain issues by ordering maybe twice as much or three times as much as we would normally order to make sure that we don't have our supply chain issues and that the customers are satisfied. But right now, there are some supply chain issues that we can overcome, and that, believe it or not, it's hard to find large quantities of beef and chicken and turkey these days. For those who've gone to the grocery store, we know there's a huge chicken wing shortage, and a lot of places have gone to. I know I was in a restaurant in Oak Park the other day, and instead of having chicken wings as appetizers, they had chicken drumsticks as appetizers because that's the part of the chicken fewer people like. So it goes back to, if there's a customer demand, can you change your product? Can you change your way of doing things? But really don't run the customer away. And then in order to make sure that we have enough employees around, like I said, we increased the salary, we increased benefits, we started giving more days off, added some extra holidays. And also now we're implementing a incentive program that if our staff, especially our production staff, hit certain milestones, they get bonus pay. And also we have a very generous policy of if you refer an employee, you get a nice check. And if that employee stays 90 days, you get an even nicer check. So just, you have to think of ways to also motivate, stimulate, and, just get employees to want to come to work, but also getting them to want to stay there. And then another thing I don't have on this list, and I added as I walked through the facility, I looked at it and said, hey, it's kind of warm in here. Do you guys want fans? Yeah, we need fans. And I said, well, give me a list of things that we'll call creature comforts that would make it easier for you to do the job. And I got a list of things, and it wasn't, and surprisingly, it didn't cost a lot of money, but some simple things like pads for them, the mats for them to stand on while they're working, chairs to sit down while they're doing some of the packing. And then one of the items that I would have never thought they would have put on the list as creature comforts is they wanted the Green Metals t-shirt. So everybody got a nice company t-shirt, which, no, those are some of the simple things, because now you think about it, it makes them feel like they're part of the team, right? And so this was one area in our production team. And so I decided that I wasn't going to do it for everybody else. And I was going to let those other managers have their staff and production staff ask them for those t-shirts as well, because, part of it is you want to have a little rivalry going on there, and seeing, when that happens and kind of gamifying things, people tend to work a lot harder and want to come to work and want to do the job. So we'll see how that works out. All right, so then as I start wrapping up my presentation so we can get into more of the Q&A session, I want to leave you guys with some keys to long-term business survival. And as I said before, when you really look at these items, you want to do this before the crisis happened. And that's why at the bottom, I gave you the model of the Boy Scouts, and that's just be prepared. And it's always very simple. The answers are simple. The execution is usually a little more difficult, but the answers to all these things are very, very simple. And financial planning is just so important. Understanding your cash needs. and consistently review your expenses. I do that on the personal level. I do it on the business level. I really don't want to spend more money than I have to on anything. And if there are ways that we can cut costs, I'm certainly willing. I'm certainly going to try to find out a way to do it. And and one of the things that businesses, they have to be well financed in order to survive some of the tough times. You need that surplus. You need that cushion. So if you don't have one, you really should think about how do you get that, whether it's a line of credit, low cost loan. I know I received a email either today or yesterday from Allies for Community Business, and they have a 3% interest rate loan. That's a good interest rate, and so and they work with small businesses. So those are some of the things that you want to think about. And it's always they always say it's better to borrow money when you don't need it than try to borrow it when you do need it, because usually the banks, especially when it's a small business, they really hate giving businesses money who really need money. They want to give you money when you don't need it. And then lastly, in order for all this to work, you need to keep good books. And once again, that's been the nightmare of us working with a lot of small businesses, is that they don't keep good books, which makes it very difficult to get money, to get loans, and makes it very difficult to understand where your business is. So in many instances, you're already in a crisis and didn't even know it. And just the fact that, say, prices started rising with inflation and supply chain issues, it became clearly obvious that you had issues. But in many instances, if you kept good books, you would have known that well beforehand, and you would have been able to do something about it. And then I always like crisis management because there always will be a crisis in business. And so you might as well put a crisis management section into your business plan in the way you operate. And because it's really difficult to overcome a crisis when you're not prepared for it. And so you really have to think about what would be the impact of any economic related issues, and think about those ahead of time. You have to foresee that. And I tell people I'm just a news junkie because I always want to know where everything is going. I watch the local news, I watch the national news, I watch the business news to just keep a good feel for what the trends are and what's happening. I tell people I can look at the prices. I can look at the price of what unleaded gasoline is traded for on the markets today and tell you to the penny what the price at the pump will be in a week. Those are the types of things that, I'm not saying get to that point, but to understand more what's going on in the world will help you really navigate and start preparing for crisis in your business. Practice responding to worst case economic related scenarios. And we've hit those a lot of times. And what we found is that most people weren't ready, right? When we had the crash of 2008, no one was ready. And even today, the pandemic, nobody was ready. Let's say there were very few people who were ready. And we saw a lot of people go out of business. And I think the big thing is that we don't have all these huge disasters on a regular basis. So it's like, what do I do to be prepared for it? And I always say that cash is the best way to be prepared for anything. Have some money sitting in the bank, especially if you're a small business. And then ensure that you have resources and can gain access to those resources. And for us, we know that we can gain access to resources. We know we have investors who have the money. So that takes a lot of pressure off us. We want to do things right, but we don't necessarily have to worry about, well, will we be able to make payroll this week? And that's nice to be able to go to bed every night knowing that all your employees are going to get paid and only one person's going to scream at you in one email for about a minute, and then you move on because you know that that's what they do, and you get ready for it 2 weeks later when payroll comes out again. So not always pleasant, but it's easy enough to survive. And when you expect it, that's all the cost of doing business with investors. All right, so as that wraps up my presentation, the general part of the presentation, as I said before, at InUrban, we are always willing to help small businesses. We don't necessarily work directly with a lot of small businesses. We usually work through them with those businesses through some of the programs that we operate. However, You can always shoot us off an email if you have some general business question or you want to have a 15-minute chat with one of our staff members about a business issue. We're always more than willing to do that, and we don't turn on the clock. I always jokingly say if you take more than 45 minutes, the clock's going to start ticking. Or if you, I always take a nice lunch in lieu of payment. So, we're really more in terms of some of the work that we do. We take it more from a social enterprise perspective, in that we are doing everything we can to support small businesses here in the Chicago area. So it's not always about the money, but it's about our passion for helping small business owners and really supporting them in any way that we can. And so I always leave with with a comment or a mantra. And today it's just stay focused. I mean, this is one of the toughest times. Pandemic we thought was bad. This is not so great, but I always encourage business owners to stay focused, keep your head down, and keep moving. And once again, if you survive COVID-19 in your business, we can survive this as well, because at least the customers are out there now and the opportunities are out there. It's just a matter now of being able to deliver a quality product or quality service very consistently and to the customer's liking. All right, so I thank everyone who has joined. I hope this has been informative, and I now will open up the presentation to any questions that we may have.
Looks like you have one question in the Q&A box.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I see a question. It says, do you have any tips for a service company and cannot lower costs? I have a student education tour company. Are there any grants that you know to help to reduce the cost of the trips for the student? Thank you. All right, so one of the things that I will say is that in terms of business opportunities, I am actually anti-grant. I know grants are sometimes necessary, but I don't like the grants can come and grants can go. And so I never look at a grant as being a way of running a business unless you're a nonprofit, and because that's how you mostly operate. But as a for-profit business, I recommend that people look at their business model, and if your business model is relying on grants to pay for costs, then it's time to revamp your business model. And so, so you say you can't lower costs. I'm gonna mildly disagree without knowing your whole business. I'm gonna disagree with that. You can lower costs, but once again, I think that this is a matter of how the business operation and business and the way your business has been designed. And so if your business is designed where you can't lower costs, you need grants to be able to pay for trips, then it's probably a time to rethink the business model and revamp the business model. And like I said, without knowing exactly how your business is operating, without seeing your business plan, and yeah, I sent you our email address, but if you want to send your business plan over to me, I can certainly take a look at it and give you some tips in terms of that. But yeah, I just I don't, once again, I can't say without knowing your business what the best approach is, but I do look at these 4 approaches that I made are some of the things that you should look at in terms of your business. All right. We have the second question. What caliber of business person in regards to finding someone to look at my business from a critique standpoint to let me know what they see from the outside looking in? All right, that's a good question. So one of the things that one of the programs I used to run, we thought about, we help food businesses that were in the food, selling products to stores. And so we were looking for mentors for these businesses. And so the question was, do we pair them with a mentor who's in their business, like, in a related business, or do we pair them with a mentor who knows absolutely very little about their business, but they know a lot about business? So the mentors that worked out the best were mentors who know very little about that specific business that that person was in, but knew a lot about business in general. I would say if you're going to look for someone who knows nothing about your business because they will ask more questions. Sometimes the person who knows a lot about the business may assume that you know everything, and they may be going down the same path that you're going down. But to me, generally, when you have an outsider looking in, the best outsider is one that has no relative biases about your business, whether it's good or bad. And so for me, I don't like looking at food businesses because I'll be very critical about them because I kind of know I've seen enough of them. Uh, but I would say that if you're going to look at have someone take a look at your business, and it also depends on what type of help do you think you need with your business. So if you think that you're struggling financially, it's probably better to have someone who has a good financial background in terms of looking at businesses, but not necessarily say in that same space that you're operating in, but just a good financial background. Someone who can look at your books and say, hey, here's some issues. And I'll give you a good example is uh, one of the companies that I looked at a few months ago. I was looking at their books and I was like, so what are your cost of goods? Where are your cost of goods? And it's like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm looking at your financial sheet and I don't see cost of goods. And you sell a product. And they said, oh, it's just wrapped down there, under expenses. Like, that's not where it's supposed to be. So how do you know what your gross margins are if your cost of goods are, and this to me, it was quickly obvious. And so I said, here's what you need to do. And then let's come back and talk about where you stand with your business. But if you don't know what you're not tracking your cost of goods, that's an issue. So I just say have someone who has experience, at least some experience in the area that you feel that you need the most help with. And I hope that answers your question. All right. Certainly open to any other questions.
There's a question in the chat.
That was just a thank you. I did see that. Thank you. Let me just double check. Oh, okay. These are just, I see 2 comments in the chat. And that's a thank you. And you're certainly welcome. I really enjoy speaking about business and helping people out. Okay, I see another question. How do I effectively calculate my cost of goods? That's a good question. So to effectively calculate your cost of goods, you have to first understand what goes into cost of goods. And so anything that's related to making your product goes into your cost of goods. One of the areas where I've seen people go wrong is they don't put labor into their cost of goods. So you look at it like if you're making a bottle of hot sauce, every ingredient that goes into that bottle of hot sauce is in your cost of goods. The bottle is in your cost of goods. The cap is in your cost of goods. The label is in your cost of goods. Then if you're putting it into a box for shipping, that goes into your cost of goods. Well, if you're shipping it to the customer, that goes into your cost of goods. And then, like I said, most people forget about labor and putting that into their cost of goods. And especially if you are 1 or 2 person shop, it's like, well, I do it myself, so I don't have to pay for labor. At some point you will, and that is a true cost of goods. So if you're making the product yourself, you should assign yourself an hourly rate that I would say is the hourly rate that you would pay someone else to do it. Track your hours when you're manufacturing, and the time that you use manufacturing is part of the cost of goods. And if you don't effectively calculate that, when you go to move to a co-packer, say in that instance, they're going to charge you for labor, and you're going to say, oh, now my product is more expensive than what it takes me to make it. And so that's where a lot of business owners go wrong. So I would say just make sure every item that goes into that packaging to get it ready for shipping is into your cost of goods, including labor. So, okay, so any other questions?
There's a new question in the chat.
Okay. No, I'm missing the chat. Okay. When raising prices, is it better to raise it once for the whole year or every 6 months? I'm food service based business and price keeps increasing for packaging. Um, that's a good question. It part of it, it really depends on um, your customer tolerance for raising prices, and most customers don't have that tolerance, especially when if especially if you're dealing with an institution, is basically they want you to lock in a pricing. So I would say that to me, it's probably better to get ahead of the price rate, pricing. And if you're going to do a price raise, maybe try to anticipate, as I talked about earlier, try to anticipate where pricing is going or the cost is going, and then say, well, my pricing went up 10%, but maybe I should do a 15% increase to get ahead of that. So, but there's no magic formula to when you raise prices. It really depends on your customer and the nature of your business. But I'm always of the mantra that raise early and raise often if you can, uh, and until the customer gives you pushback. But as I talked about earlier too, is that having a partnership with the customer and helping them understand that costs are going up. And I don't think there's anyone uh, in this, at least I would say in this country, will disagree with you that the price of food is, going up, right? We know the price of food's going up, and so I don't think that it takes much convincing to tell people that the price of food is going up. The convincing is to get them to absorb some of that cost. So yeah, so I would just try to get ahead of it, but also think about it, uh, once again, and how can you look at reducing some of those costs of goods. Maybe there is not a way to do it right away, but also keep that in mind as time goes by, because you can raise prices, but you can also try to find ways to reduce your cost. All right, then we have a question. I have a uh, landscaping business. You're welcome, Jacqueline. I have a landscaping business. Uh, the cost of goods for services such as brick patios. Yep, I just had a brick patio put in, as well as the gas for transport vehicles, machining. Is it healthy to cut those services for some time and focus more on labor only work? Actually, that's a really, you answered your own question there. There are times, and I know sometimes people are very reluctant to say, hey, maybe it's time not to do this. Maybe we need to put this on hiatus. But if prices are getting so expensive that you can't figure out a way to make a profit, and that's what I talked about earlier, is that we went to higher margin customers. You can also go to higher margin, just start focusing on higher margin products that you sell, higher margin services that you sell, and that makes it a lot easier to weather that storm. So yeah, it's because you think about it, if you're losing money on it, that's 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 unhealthy, right? Having a financial loss. And so I always say that people are in business to make a profit. And if there's some section of your businesses that is not profitable, it's probably time to get out of that for a while until prices come down. I know, like, even I was reading the other day that the price of lumber has like decreased dramatically over the last few months. So there is a time that these prices are extremely high, but there's going to be a time when some of these things start coming down again, and then you can say, "Hey, we're back in the doing brick patios again." And once again, I talked about that. Gas and for vehicles and machinery is going up. My landscaper, he did this to me. He asked me, "Did I have gas to put in his into one of his pieces of equipment, his compressor or something like that?" So I actually bought him a gallon of gas. But it's just one of those things where we all have to look out for each other too. But no, that's a great approach to it, is to decrease services for a period of time. Then I'm going back to the Q&A section. Um, let's see. Can you also share information on resources to help calculate pricing of a sale item for reference? I run a bakery and sometimes run it into difficult in setting prices. Yeah, there is Send me an email. There's a couple of websites that you can actually put your information in, and it helps you calculate. And matter of fact, here's what I'll tell you. If you can't find it, then send me an email at info@inurbanstrategies.com. But if you just Google a margin calculator, it allows you to look at, there are some that are online. They're really simple. They say, put in your cost of goods, put in what gross margin you want, and it'll shoot out a sales price for you. And there are some that work even if you're going through distribution, and they're free. They're online. But like I said, if you can't find it, just send me a note, and I'll look it up for you, and I'll send over a couple of links that'll help you out. And then there is regards to point of sale systems. Which would you suggest, and what would you advise charging the customers for credit card processing fees? I ain't not in the position to suggest any of them. I know there are a lot of them out there. They basically all operate very similar. So, I would just look at some other business owners and get some recommendations. And, some of the things that I do is Google, like, what are the best POS systems, and compare and just figure out what works best for my business. And in many instances, people do charge customers credit card processing fees. Sometimes customers are a little reluctant to pay that extra 3-4% that you want to tack onto it. But also you could just think about that adding it into the price of your products, a credit card processing fee. That way and it doesn't necessarily have to be the entire processing fee, because some people won't be paying by credit card, but most people do. So if you charge a little bit over what you have to pay, you will actually at least recoup your costs, and maybe a percentage extra for those customers who may pay in cash or by some other method. I hope that helps. All right, I don't see any other questions in the
Don't
chat.
see any. So Shelby, thank you for today's presentation. I
Thank
hope
you.
this was very helpful for all of our attendees today. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, to receive credit for this webinar, please send an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about our upcoming webinars, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Thank you again, Shelby, and we'll talk to you soon.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Evening.